morning, friends. Go ahead and stand and let's worship together. When night has fallen and fear is coming, still you're calling me. When faith is lost and my hope exhausted, you will be my strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo in my soul. Like an echo in my soul. In every season, you keep repeating promises to me. Now there's no stopping what you have started till it is complete. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo in my soul. My soul, like an echo in my soul. My soul. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. And I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo in my soul. My soul, like an echo in my soul. My soul.
darkness falls and won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. Oh, my God will never fail. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. Every war he wages, he will win. Oh, I'm not backing down from any giant, 'cause I know how this story ends. Yes, I know how this story ends. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. You take the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise, treasures that fade, are never enough. When you came along, satisfied here in your light. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you.
Miracles when you move, such an easy thing for you to do. Your hand is moving right now. You are still showing up at the tomb of baby Lazarus. Your voice is calling me out right now. I know you're able, and my God, come through again. You can do all things.
Let's go to the throne room of God together. Father, as we step into this new year, we stand amazed that after a year like 2020, when so many of our hopes crushed, so many plans were swept aside, seems like everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong, that even after a year like that, you weren't failing. You were on your throne. You've always been on your throne. You're always reigning. You're always working everything together for the good of those who love you. And we lose sight of that very easily. So I ask that you would forgive us the times that we rely on ourselves more than we trust in you. Forgive us the times that we go looking to the world, to governments, to the gifts you've given us to try and find comfort when we should be coming to you. We want to believe. Help our unbelief, God. I'm thankful that you hear our prayers, that you've never lost a battle. Not even when your son was dying on the cross. We thank you for that. May we trust you. We love you. We thank you. And we pray all these things in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. Good morning, Horizons Church. Will you wander around and say hi to someone before you sit down? Good morning, Horizons Church. Happy New Year. We did somehow, by the grace of God, make it through 2020, so that is really awesome. I know we say that like, the calendar, when it hits the new year, everything somehow magically resets, I mean, it doesn't, but there is something magical about that little change in the number at the end of the thing, right? There's just something about that. Just the little mercies. It's the little mercies that get us through. So we're thankful for what we get there. If we haven't met yet, my name's Josiah. I'm the assistant campus pastor here at our Lost Creek campus. We're so glad that you are here worshiping with us and kicking off your new year with us, especially if you're new. If we've not yet had the pleasure of meeting, I would love to meet you at the end of the service. I'll be right over there at our welcome area where that sign just lit up. And I'd love to put a gift in your hands to commemorate your time with us today. And I'd just love to introduce myself and get to know you a little bit and show you how you can get connected here at the church if you're new, all right? So I'd love to meet you over there at the end of the service. And for all of you regulars and old-timers, we're encouraging you, as always, to download and utilize the Horizons Church app for all of your in-service needs. It's got all the tools you could possibly want in there. So if you want to follow along with the sermon and take notes, you can do that through the app. If you heard something really profound today and you want to go back and listen to it again, you can access the sermon catalog through the app. And, of course, you can give through the app. It is because of your financial partnership and generosity that we are able to do all the ministry we do here at the church. So thank you very much to those of you who give. If you would like to start giving or continue, you can do so utilizing also any of the methods that are listed up on the screens right now. And if you brought your gift with you today and you want to drop it in the buckets as you are leaving, you can feel free to do that as well. And in the spirit of the Christmas season, we are still, for the next week or two at least, taking up our Christmas offering. So if you still want to contribute to the work that we're doing in Cambodia, but you haven't yet done so, there is still time to do that. Just as a reminder, it's only $280 to feed, clothe, shelter, and educate an orphan for an entire year. If you don't have that to give, but you want to give something, you can feel free to contribute whatever you can, all right? We would be grateful to you for that. Over to my left and your right is our prayer room. There should be someone in there praying for us right now and during the whole service. So if you have a need, please feel free to utilize that at any moment. My father is up to kick off our new series. We're going to be going through the book of Nehemiah together. The series is called Rubble. He will be preaching via video today, though, because he may have been exposed to a case of COVID, and he just wanted to play it safe because he loves you all. And so he's preaching via video. So he'll be joining us here shortly on the big screens, but there is one quick video announcement before that. So if you would, please direct your attention to the big screens.
Hi, moms and dads. If your little ones find it difficult to remain quiet in today's worship service, please be courteous to those around you and take advantage of our cry rooms located in the back of the sanctuary. If the cry rooms are occupied, we have tables and sofas for family viewing in our cafe. Either way, you'll be able to see and hear everything, and your child will enjoy the extra freedom. And now, here's our lead pastor, Quint Pitts.
Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2021. Good riddance to 2020. We're glad you're here with us at Horizons, worshiping with us. And those of you at our campuses, thank you guys for being here. Those of you at Facebook and YouTube and our online campus, thank you for being with us today. You know, Mike was born in a small town in Minnesota, and he really liked that small town. Like the great theologian John Cougar Mellencamp said, I can breathe in a small town, and I will die in a small town. That was the way Mike felt about it. He liked this small town in Minnesota. He went to college in this small town in Minnesota, but he didn't like college. Even though he liked the small town, he didn't like college. He only went for one quarter, and after that quarter, he said, you know what, I'm just kind of wasting my time with this. While he was in that college quarter, he worked 2 jobs, and he liked the jobs, and he kept working those until he got fired from his grocery store job. And after being fired from that job, he kind of did an appraisement of his life, and he said, you know what, I'm going to try my hand as an entrepreneur. And he started a carpet cleaning business. Actually, he started the carpet cleaning business because his sister's apartment flooded. And then he tried to make money as a professional gambler out in Las Vegas. That didn't always go well. In fact, he got thrown out literally physically thrown out of one of the largest casinos in Vegas because they suspected him of card counting. He tried raising pigs, which is, you know, something everybody dreams of doing, right? Being a pig farmer. But he didn't have a farm. He just had a little apartment, and he built a pig pen in the middle of a neighborhood there in his community. And when the pigs knocked the fence down, they ran all through the neighborhood. That didn't go very well. In fact, the hog market, I didn't even know there was a hog market until I read this story, but the hog market collapsed, and he lost all of his investment in the pig market. So that was followed by a lunch wagon business. And he heard about how these lunch wagons were making a big deal and a big splash out in California. And he said, well, why won't that work in Minnesota? So he tried it. And here's how he did it. This was his approach, what I think is genius. He went to the largest business in that little town, and he told the boss, kind of worked his way in to see the boss, and said, hey, I will give your employees free sandwiches for a whole week just as a trial, and then after the trial, we can set this up. And the boss went for it. And that went okay for a while. And then Mike started working part-time as a bartender. And eventually what he did was he bought a bar, and these are his words, not mine. He said, I probably shouldn't have done that. It wasn't a good idea because I was an addict at the time. I was a hardcore cocaine addict. All of his life, Mike had trouble sleeping. He spent sizable amounts of money trying to improve his sleep environment. He tried to buy new bedding. He tried to buy new pillows, new blankets. He tried all kinds of things in a vain attempt to better sleep. But sleepless nights, that wasn't a big problem for Mike. The big problem for Mike was cocaine. Cocaine cost him a ton of money. Cocaine is not cheap. It destroyed his marriage. He lost his house over cocaine, and he nearly lost his business. In March of 2008, Mike went on a 2-week crack cocaine bender. And in fact, he says that for those 2 weeks, he didn't sleep. For 14 days, he didn't sleep. He looked so bad that when he went back to his drug dealer to buy more cocaine, the drug dealer refused to sell to him. And in fact, the drug dealer took a picture of him. He stole his phone and said, let me take a picture of you so you'll see what you look like. And there's the picture right there. That's how Mike looked after this 2-week cocaine bender. Mike's life had become a pile of rubble. It was a dystopian tale of lost money, a lost marriage, lost houses, lost time, a lot of lost self-respect. Mike's life was a pile of rubble. And some of you right now are staring at a pile of rubble in your own life. Maybe in 2020, your health became a pile of rubble. I don't know. Some people did lose some health in the course of the year. Maybe your mental health, is because, being shut up. A lot of people right now are afraid, and, emotional health, fear is one of the worst feelings that you can have. Maybe that's become a pile of rubble. I have friends whose careers have become a pile of rubble as a result of the COVID and the shutdowns and the loss of income. I know friends who've had to close their businesses that they put their lives into have had to close. I know people who've had to close their churches. In fact, the Southern Baptist Convention says that 20%, get this guys, 20% of American churches are not going to survive this pandemic. That's over 60,000 American churches that the Southern Baptist Convention is predicting will close their doors before this pandemic ends. Folks, we've got maybe your marriage. Maybe your marriage is a pile of rubble. Maybe it's just not where it should be. It's not where it should be. Maybe your dreams, your plans, your goals. Just for example, us as a church. As a church, we had big plans, dreams, and goals for the year 2020. Of course, all of those turned into a pile of rubble, but we're going to resurrect those, I promise you that. Whatever the pile of rubble is you may be looking at right now, I want you to know you are not alone. You're not alone. We've all had the ugly experience of looking at walls that we thought were strong. We thought they were going to stand the test of time, and we've seen those walls fall to destruction. In fact, I don't know, you probably won't find much of an argument if you said the whole year of 2020 was just a pile of rubble. So, when it came time for us to decide, what do we want to preach about in the first series of the new year, 2021, you know what? It took no time at all for us to make that decision. We didn't have to pray about that for very long at all. For the next 6 weeks, we're going to study a man who found a pile of rubble in his homeland. And somehow, miraculously, he marshaled an effort that turned that pile of rubble back into a strong, gleaming city, the city of God, Jerusalem. So for the next 6 weeks, we're going to focus all of our attention on a guy named Nehemiah. Nehemiah faced a massive amount of rubble, but he had something in his soul that other Jewish men and women had lost at this time period. Nehemiah had vision in his soul. He envisioned Jerusalem as it could be. He envisioned Jerusalem as it should be. He envisioned Jerusalem not as a pile of rubble. He envisioned Jerusalem as a gleaming city with strong defenses and strong citizens filled with self-respect and love for God. That was Nehemiah's vision for Jerusalem. Now, I know this time of year people talk about vision, and they talk about vision. You read books about vision. People have all kinds of definitions about vision. Let me tell you my definition of vision, all right? In fact, of all the definitions I've ever heard, the one that I love the most is Andy Stanley. Andy Stanley's vision definition is really clear and succinct. He says, vision is a clear mental picture of what could be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. A clear mental picture of what could be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. That brings us to our story here in Nehemiah chapter 1. But before we dive in, I got to give you some background, all right? Or if I don't give you this background, you're not going to understand why the city of Jerusalem is in rubble, and you're not going to understand why my boy Nehemiah cares, all right? Why does he give a rip, all right? So here's the story, all right? Around 609 BC, the Babylonians came in and they seized Jerusalem. They put it under a siege. And during that siege, they took prisoners. They hauled those prisoners, mostly the noblemen of Jerusalem. They hauled them back to Babylon with them. That's where we get Daniel. If you remember your Bible, Old Testament, the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those guys were carried off around 609 BC as basically prisoners of war with Babylon. All right, that episode right there began what is known as the 70 years of captivity in the Babylonian captivity, okay? A few years after that, 609 BC to around 597 BC, guess what? The Babylonians came back and did the same thing over again. They did exactly the same thing. In fact, they not only put Jerusalem under siege, this time they weren't so kind. They literally just destroyed the place. I mean, they knocked down the walls. They destroyed the temple. That was in March of 597 BC. All right. Now, fast forward 70 years. 70 years later, after this all began with the Babylonians, guess what? If you're a conqueror and a tyrant and an emperor, there's always going to be a conqueror or a tyrant and an emperor who's bigger and badder than you are. And that's what happened to the Babylonians. The Persians came in and they conquered Babylon. Now, the Persians were more kind to the Jewish people who were there kind of stuck as slaves in Babylon. In fact, they sent some of their guys back. In fact, sent back a guy named Rubble. He was the leader of a group of Jewish people who went back to Jerusalem. And their mission when they went back to Jerusalem was to rebuild the temple there in Jerusalem, okay? And they started that in 538 BC. And that project ended up, I think they dedicated the temple around 515 BC. Now, while all that's going on, that's where we get the ministry of Haggai. Again, if you know your Old Testament Bible, Haggai and Zechariah, they wrote during this period of rebuilding the walls or rebuilding the temple of Jerusalem. Then there's a gap of 57 years where nothing really happens. There's no return of Jewish exiles back to Babylon or back to Jerusalem. The 57 years. But this is where we get the book of Esther, if you remember your Old Testament. Esther was written during this time period. We had the Miss Persia contest, for Esther to become the queen of Persia. And then after that 57-year gap, in 458 BC, a guy named Ezra, who was a priest, the priest, he went back. He led another group of Jewish people back from Babylon and Persia, back to Jerusalem. And his focus was not on the temple. It wasn't on rebuilding any walls or anything physical. His idea was to reform the Jewish people. And he led a spiritual revival that lasted for 2 years, from 458 BC to 456 BC. Then there's another gap of 12 years where not a lot goes on, and then we come to October of 444 BC. October 444 BC, that's where we meet our boy Nehemiah, all right? That's Nehemiah chapter 1, if you got your Bible, all right? And Nehemiah chapter 1 is in October of 444 BC, back in Persia. This Jewish man named Nehemiah, he hears about the plight of his homeland. That, there have been people going back and forth, and some of them have said, the temple looks decent, but the city of Jerusalem is a train wreck. The walls are down, the gates are burned, and this information just cut his heart. He felt something when he heard the plight of his homeland, even though he'd never laid eyes on it. He'd never seen Jerusalem. He'd never set foot in Jerusalem. He was a slave. He didn't have freedom to move around. He was a slave. And this burden that he felt caused him to weep. And he began a prolonged period of fasting and prayer. Little did he know that these deep feelings, these deep concerns for Jerusalem were the initial birth pains of a vision that God would give him and that people would be reading about thousands of years later. I want you to notice something about Nehemiah's vision. Nehemiah's vision didn't start out as a vision. God's visions almost never start out as a vision. They usually start out as a concern, as a burden, as a longing to see things change. A God-ordained vision begins that way. You'll hear something, you'll see something, and it gets your attention. And the thought it generates a thought of how the future could look and should look. Something will bother you about the way things are and the way things are headed. And, we get bothered by things every day, but usually they're just passing concerns. Well, when God is birthing a vision in you, it ain't passing. It just stays there, right? It just stays there. You might lose sleep over it. Look at Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. Nehemiah's concern over the conditions of Jerusalem consumed him. It broke his heart. He thought of nothing really else except what was opposed to what should be. And a vision was being conceived. That's how vision starts. Vision starts, write this down if you're taking notes. Vision starts as an eye full of rubble. I mean, you get an eye full of that rubble that you're looking at, and you say, man, this looks bad, and it shouldn't look this way. Think about this. Nehemiah has never seen his homeland. He's never laid eyes on Jerusalem. He's just heard little stories here and there, descriptions of the rubble that was once this great city. And even though he's never seen the rubble with his physical eyes, he has seen the rubble with his mental eyes, his emotional eyes, and even his spiritual eyes. And maybe that's going to be the same with you too. The sight of that rubble fills your soul. No matter how it fills your soul, it fills your soul. And you feel like you've got to do something about it. Meanwhile, back in Minnesota, in that little town, Mike got an eyeful of the rubble that had become his life. He realized how much money he had lost. He realized his lost marriage. He realized his lost house. He realized how much time he had lost and all the self-respect that he had lost. He recognized that picture, as he saw that picture that his drug dealer took for him, he recognized that his life had become a pile of rubble. And it still took some time, even after seeing that picture. But finally, on January the 16th, 2009, Mike cried out to God, which is always a good thing to do when you get a burden or concern, man. You got to cry out to God. And this is what he cried out to God. I only have one prayer, Lord. I want to wake up in the morning and never have the desire for cocaine again. Nehemiah did that too. Nehemiah didn't just have a concern. Nehemiah didn't just start feeling bad about what he saw in his mind's eye about Jerusalem. He did something about it. He prayed. He prayed. Verse 4, he says, "For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." God answered his prayers, folks. God answered those prayers. In fact, the king of Persia, a guy named Artaxerxes, believe it or not, gives Nehemiah permission to go back to Jerusalem. Again, he's never been there. He gives him permission to go to Jerusalem with not only permission, but resources from the king of Persia so that he can repair the walls of the great city of Jerusalem. He gave him resources. He gave him an escort. Consider this. I mean, you got to think about this. From the time Nehemiah was a little boy, he'd been nothing but a slave. But God had been engineering every circumstance in Nehemiah's life to place him in a position so that when he became an adult grown man, at some point in that adult grown man stage, he became cupbearer to the king of Persia. He basically became Artaxerxes' bartender, for lack of a better word. He was cupbearer to the king. Now, there is nothing in Nehemiah's experience that makes him believe that God is orchestrating events in his life. Not one thing looks like God is taking him in a direction so that he can actually do something about what's happened to Jerusalem. In fact, it looks like, from Nehemiah's perspective, it looks like the exact opposite. God hasn't done anything for me. I'm a slave, for crying out loud. But he orchestrated events so that people saw Nehemiah. People of influence saw Nehemiah as a trustworthy man, as a man of integrity. Because here's the thing about the bartender for the king. You're not just a bartender. You're a trusted man. You got to be a man of integrity to be the bartender for the king. Because if you're going to assassinate somebody in the ancient Near East, how are you going to do it? Poison is almost always the preferred method of assassination. So these kings always put the people that they trusted the most, men and women, mostly men, of integrity, became their cupbearers. And they made sure that no one messed with their wine. They made sure no one could taint the wine or poison the wine. And that was a big, important part of what God was doing in Nehemiah's life. Now, again, he can't see how that this is being orchestrated so that he will be in a place of influence with the king. He can't see that while it's happening. Now, you can almost always see it when you look back. But when you're in it, you have to look forward with faith. And some of you are there right now. Some of you are right now thinking, Pitt's vision, dude, I feel like I can't even move. You know, what do you mean vision? What do you mean changing rubble? What are you talking about? I feel like there's nothing for me here to do at all. I feel completely lost. I feel like maybe God has forgotten completely about me. What do you mean vision? to change things. Look, God is orchestrating events for you. He's moving pieces around the chessboard for you. He's moving you around the chessboard. You have to believe that with faith, that he is sovereign and he is putting you in a place where you're going to be able to make a difference, because he will do that. He will work behind the scenes. And here he is in Nehemiah's life. He's about to raise the curtain. It's easy for me to say because I know the end of the story, right? That's easy for me to say. I've read all the way through the book of Nehemiah. I know how this ends. Nehemiah didn't know how it was going to end. He had no idea. God wants to do the same thing in your life. He wants to put you in a place so that you can be a visionary and make a difference. Nehemiah, armed with letters and permission from the king, he's got bona fides, from the king of Persia. He's got resources from the king of Persia. He's even got a stinking military escort from the king of Persia as he sets out for Jerusalem. And as he arrives in Jerusalem, one of the very first things that he does when he gets in Jerusalem with that military escort, he sits for 3 days. And then he goes out on a tour. He wants to get an eyeful of the rubble. He wants to see it for himself. Because up until now, he's only imagined what that city looked like. He's only imagined what those fallen over walls and those burned gates look like. But now he's going to see it up close and personal. He wants to be witness to himself to the immense size and immense scope of the rubble that was once the great city of Jerusalem. Let's skip over to chapter 2. Let's start reading at verse 11. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, and this is really important for young people, don't rush. Don't rush. I cannot tell you how stupid I was when I was a young guy. Just stupid with a capital S. I had vision in my heart. I really did. I had a lot of vision in my heart. And I just went around willy-nilly, spilling that to anybody who would listen to me. And that was not very wise. You got to wait for God's timing. Verse 12, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. This is really important. Timing. There were no mounts with me except the one that I was riding on. By night, I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate. I wonder what the Dung Gate is all about. It's an unfortunate name for a gate. Examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. This is critically important for your vision, friends. Critically important. You got to get an eyeful of that rubble. You got to see it. And you don't sugarcoat it. You just, hey, it's bad, all right? Admit it, it's bad. It's critically important, however, that you not allow the size and scope of the rubble to overwhelm you. Because if you get overwhelmed by the size and scope of the rubble, you'll just go to resignation and you'll end up in passivity. Rubble can overwhelm you, can it? It really can. And I'll write that down if you were taking notes, by the way. It can overwhelm you so much that you go to resignation and passivity. Apparently, that is what's happened to every stinking citizen in the city, in the whole stinking city of Jerusalem. They've just been overwhelmed by the size of the task, by the size of the rubble. Because they have for generations now been sitting and standing and walking and living and breathing in Jerusalem when it looks like a total train wreck. Generations, for 150 years, the people of Jerusalem have been looking at this mess. And they've done absolutely nothing about it. When Nehemiah shows up, nothing new is visible. He isn't the first person to see this problem. Everybody knows this is a problem. The people of Jerusalem have had an eyeful of this rubble every single day of their lives for 150 years. It's all there in plain sight. You can't miss the rubble if you try to miss the rubble. But no one's done anything about it. They've resigned themselves that nothing can be done. They've resigned themselves and they've gone passive. And passivity has destroyed their ability to change things. The city lay in ruins and no one is doing anything about it. That always changes when a man with a vision showed up. Nehemiah rides into town. He rides around the city of Jerusalem. He's not riding around the city because he's got lack of faith. He's not having second thoughts. You know, he's not riding around and looking at the rubble just to see whether he's decided, do I really want to do this or not? He's totally committed to this project. The reason that he's riding around is so he can tell these people who are going to be doing the bulk of the work and volunteering and the sweating and the work and the labor that's involved, he wants them to know that he's not shortchanging the problem. He's got a clear idea of how devastated the city of Jerusalem is. And when he finally announces his intentions, he knows what they're up against. He knows it. He's not going to try to sugarcoat it because there's no use in sugarcoating it. Verse 16. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. He's talking about that ride. Because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or the nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Of course they see it. They see it every stinking day. And this is the case with anyone who's casting a vision. Nehemiah has no idea how people are going to respond. You know what I'm talking about there? Have you ever had an idea, something kind of maybe that God birthed in your heart, maybe it's just a good idea, and you think, man, I'm going to go see if I can get some people excited about this, and they just look at you. Is ho-hum. That could happen to Nehemiah, right? That could certainly happen to him. He has no idea. He's the newcomer here. Maybe they'll laugh him out of town. Maybe they'll run him out of town. Maybe worse, they'll just go meh, and they ignore him. That's possible. But Nehemiah's words are a wake-up call. He's saying, open your eyes, man. Things are bad. You're in trouble here. We're in trouble here. And his fresh set of eyes did bring a new perspective. And I mean, thank God the people didn't need a lot of prodding. They took a fresh look at the situation. And in that moment, they see their city through Nehemiah's eyes. That's what visionaries have to do. We visionaries, and you're a visionary. God's got a vision for your life. I promise you. Promise you. You have to be able to inspire people, motivate people to see things the way you see things. And that's probably one of the most important skills. Vision casting always includes an element of waking people out of their resignation, waking people out of their passivity. You got to do that. Vision casters rarely bring any new pieces of information. I mean, Nehemiah is not bringing some new gee whiz invention that's going to remove all this rubble quickly. He doesn't have a new piece of information. Hey, have you guys considered this? It's not new. What is your problem? What is your vision addressing? What's the problem that your vision is addressing? The problem is not the vision. The solution is the vision. But you got to have a clear idea and context for presenting the solution. Identifying and clearly stating the problem, that's what pricks the interest of people. It engages their minds. So what problem does your vision intend to solve? If you decide, you know what, I need to get a vision for my marriage, because my marriage is a pile of rubble right now. You're going to have that conversation with your spouse. And before you just rush in there and say, hey, I went to a retreat or I read this book and here we need to start doing this. You got to think that through. What problem are you trying to solve? Identifying it and clearly identifying it. Letting people know that this is what our relationship could be. This is what our marriage could be. Remember, and this is really important too, you don't have to have the how at this point. You don't have to have the how. In fact, God probably won't give you the how. God always gives you the what and the why long before he gives you the how. I don't know how many times I've said that here at Horizons, but I've said it a lot. All right? You almost never get the how at the beginning. You got to have a clear what and you got to have a clear why when you start telling people about your vision. But you don't have to have the how figured out. JFK, when he said, let's put a man on the moon before the end of this decade, they didn't have any of the how figured out. A big fat goose egg as far as the how. He gave him a clear what, and he gave him a clear why. And that's one of the things that we have to be able to do. We've got to be able to give people a clear what. Here's what we need to do, and here's why we need to do it. And then let us all work together on the how. We can do that together. Okay, so we offer a solution. Write this down. Offer a solution and paint a mental picture of life without the rubble. Wouldn't it be nice if we could walk around and be proud of our city again? Wouldn't it be nice if our kids didn't have to worry about another invading army because we don't even have any defenses at all? Once again, the solution is obvious, but somebody has to say it. Somebody has to say it in order to motivate people to action. Simply put, Nehemiah's vision is Jerusalem as a walled city. Simply put, his mental picture is a strong city with strong defenses. And again, thank God, with very little prompting, Nehemiah's audience pictures Jerusalem as a walled city. The vision ignites a desire in them to alter their present for the sake of a potential future. Look at verse 17. Come, this is Nehemiah presenting his solution. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. And I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. Like I said, you don't have to have all the how worked out. God always gives you the what and the why before he gives you the how. But you got to be crystal clear about the what, and you got to be crystal clear about the why. No one, including Nehemiah, can accomplish a God-given vision by themselves. And neither will you be able to do that. You say, well, my vision is not really big, Pitts. Well, you're still going to need a partner or partners. You're going to need it. Maybe it's just the salvation of your friend. Maybe it's the improvement of your marriage. Maybe it's the launching of a new ministry. Maybe it's the launching of a new business. Whatever your vision is, that clear mental picture of the future, you've got to have a team. It's going to take a team whose imagination is in alignment with your imagination. A group of people whose hearts have been knitted together by what could be and what should be. If God births a vision in you, he's in the process of developing similar visions in the hearts of people around you. I promise you, God's not going to waste your time. It will ring true in their souls as you present it to them. Meanwhile, back in Minnesota, God is answering the prayer of Mike. You remember when we last left Mike? He looked at that picture of himself that the drug dealer took, and he cried out to God. A few months later, he said, God, I only got one prayer. I don't want to ever desire cocaine again. Well, guess what? God delivered Mike of a 20-year cocaine addiction, and Mike became convinced that God had bigger plans for him. He got a clear vision in his heart and mind of what his life could be and what his life should be. His business actually started taking off. It even got some media coverage. The local newspaper in the little town there in Minnesota, the local newspaper ran a feature story of Mike and his business. In fact, the day that story hit the newsstands, Mike's cell phone started dinging. Right? It's ding, ding, ding. And a friend of him asked him, what's going on with your phone? He said, well, I set it up so that every time somebody orders one of my products, my phone dings. And he said, my goal is, my dream is that have it someday that my phone just blows up with dings and I have to shut the thing off. And he says, as soon as I said those words, my phone blew up with dings. It just started dinging all over the place and he had to shut it off. He says, I still get goosebumps when I think about that day. And at that moment, Mike's dream of a good, strong business kind of became a reality. You know, at that time, Mike had about 5 employees. By the end of that year, he had 500 employees. Today, Mike's company has nearly 1,500 employees. His revenues have grown from $100,000 a year to over $300 million a year. It is truly an amazing story. Mike's life was a pile of rubble. He didn't allow the rubble to overwhelm him. He cried out to God. God gave him a vision for what his life could be and should be. And Mike's miraculous story doesn't end there. His personal relationship with Jesus Christ has become so robust and so vibrant. He's one of the most generous people you'll ever see. In fact, he's given away millions of dollars, and even today, he's giving away money to help fellow crack addicts and addicts of all kind. He invests and partners with rehab centers that are Christ-centered and Bible-based today. His relationship with Jesus Christ has done all of that. And you know Mike. You do know Mike. Mike is Mike Lindell. He's the My Pillow guy. You've probably seen his commercials on television because they are everywhere. And you only see the success that his life has become in recent years, but Mike's life was a nasty pile of rubble only a few years ago. And he got a clear vision of what his life could be and should be. And folks, can I just say this? You are sitting in the middle of a church that is alive with the work of God, where God has led us with visions and visionaries since the very early days of our church. Ordinary people with ordinary jobs and ordinary families and ordinary responsibilities. They get an eyeful of rubble and they say, I'm going to do something about that. I'm not going to let that rubble overwhelm me. I'm going to do something about it. They start painting a picture of how life should be and how it could be. Man, folks, people are looking today for something meaningful and significant to give their lives to. And if God has given you a vision, He's going to raise up a team to work with you to that end. Maybe your team will be just your spouse. I don't know. You don't have to have a huge team. Maybe it's just your spouse. Maybe it's just your 16-year-old daughter. Or maybe it's a whole big honking room filled with volunteers. The size of the scope of it doesn't really matter. The principle is the same. Vision has the potential to set a course for a group of people that is God-honoring and something that will make a true difference. There's always going to be someone who will ask, to what extent can I give my life to that vision when you cast your vision? And just as they told Nehemiah all those centuries ago, let us start rebuilding. And so they put their hearts to this good work. Father, thank you for this wonderful story of Nehemiah that we're going to be looking at for the next several weeks. He was a man who was confronted with some terrible things, a big pile of rubble, but he didn't let it overwhelm him. And he cast a vision of what could be and should be, and he made a big difference. Here we are thousands of years later reading about it. Help us to get a vision for what you want to do in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you all. Have a great week.